Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something we all struggle with: ambition. Taking big career risks is kind of the entry fee for massive success, right? You've got to put yourself out there. But sometimes that intense ambition can backfire in the most unpredictable and frankly, literally ironic ways imaginable.
So, what actually happens when your biggest career risk becomes your final mistake? It's a pretty terrifying thought. You're so hyper-focused on the big picture, the fame, the money, the ultimate payoff, that you completely overlook a tiny, seemingly insignificant variable. Well, today we're going to explore 4 historical stories where blind ambition and crushing pressure cause people to miss the little things, leading to absolute disaster.
Section 1, The Ultimate Career Risk, Miami, Florida, 1975. So let's meet Homer B. Lawyer Jr. Back in the spring of '75, Homer was a 26-year-old shoe salesman who was just incredibly bored with his life. Every single day was exactly the same, and to top it off, there was zero money in it. So Homer decides he's going to get rich quick and injects some serious excitement into his day by robbing a bank. And hey, conveniently enough, there was one sitting right around the corner from his shoe store.
Okay, let's dive into this master plan, because Homer wasn't just winging it here. He spent days meticulously planning the whole shebang. On his lunch break, he casually walks into the bank. He stretches his finger out inside his pocket, to simulate a gun, because he didn't actually own a weapon. He calmly waits his turn in line, acting completely natural. Then, he gets to the counter, hands the terrified teller a threatening note demanding the cash. She quickly bags it up, slides it over, and Homer grabs it and sprints away, totally undetected. I mean, he pulled it off. Or, at least, he thought he did. The contrast between what he expected and what actually happened is just wild. The next morning, Homer wakes up feeling absolutely on top of the world. His grand plan was to walk out his front door and treat himself to an insanely expensive breakfast as a newly rich man. But the reality? The exact second he stepped foot outside, he was immediately swarmed by this massive wall of Miami police officers and FBI agents. So how in the world did they track him down so fast? Well, here is the fatal detail. In his adrenaline-fueled rush to grab the bag of cash and run, Homer left his threatening note sitting right there on the bank counter. And, get this, he'd written that note on the back of his brainstorming scrap paper. The very same paper where he'd been scribbling down all his robbery ideas, which just so happened to include his own highly distinctive full legal name. He essentially handed the bank teller a signed confession. No way, right? Section 2, The Cursed Destiny Ring, Los Angeles, California, 1938. All right, let's move from a botched robbery over to the glimmering, high-stakes world of Hollywood. It's June 1938, and a 21-year-old actor named Jack Dunn is pacing nervously around a studio lobby. Jack desperately needed to land the lead role in a major upcoming biopic. If he didn't get this part, he was dead broke and would be forced to move all the way back home to England. And this wasn't just any role. It was Rudolph Valentino, the legendary 1920s Hollywood sex symbol who had died tragically young. Well, Jack actually got the part, but the press immediately tore into him, claiming he was way too inexperienced to play such an absolute icon. So, to silence his critics, Jack goes all in on extreme method acting. He tries to literally become Valentino. He adopts Valentino's immigrant and athlete backstory. He starts wearing these wildly flashy, expensive outfits. He even invents a club dance he calls the Valentino Roomba, dates constantly, and takes up desert hunting. But his most extreme move? Jack tracked down and wore Valentino's actual vintage platinum ring with this huge yellow stone in it, hoping it would bring him some serious luck. And this brilliantly illustrates just how crazy things get. Because that piece of jewelry was known as the Destiny Ring, and its lore was absolutely terrifying. Valentino, who loved superstitious objects, died suddenly while he owned it. And the curse definitely didn't stop there. Over the next decade, that ring was passed to a radio star, then a singer, then a burglar. And every single person who possessed it died a sudden, totally unexpected, and tragic death. And now, in 1938, it's sitting right there on Jack Dunn's finger. So, how does the ring strike this time? Well, Jack was out in the harsh California deserts playing the part of a hardened hunter just like Valentino, and he spots a tick on his hand. Before the thing could bite him, Jack quickly crushes it with his thumb, pressing it directly against the metal of the Destiny Ring. He figured he'd just saved himself from a nasty bite. But it turns out that specific tick was carrying tularemia, which is a highly infectious and often fatal disease. And here is the shocking twist that completely sealed his fate.
A few days later, Jack is back home, feeling kind of groggy, so he absent-mindedly rubs his tired eye. But he uses his fist, the exact same hand wearing the destiny ring. Those infected tick guts were still smeared all over that platinum setting. So by doing that, he literally rubbed the disease directly into his bloodstream through his eyeball. Within days, his eye swelled up, he fell into a severe delirium, and tragically, his body just completely shut down. He passed away in the hospital a week later.
Section 3, A Deadly Game of Fetch, Galland, Canada, 1909. Our third story takes us out into the unforgiving Canadian wilderness in the summer of 1909. Enter Andrew Dunn, a super dedicated, family-oriented miner. Andrew had made some pretty decent money back in the crowded mining town of Cobalt, but he was holding out for a much bigger payout for his family. So he and two partners leave the crowded town behind to track down this massive, entirely untouched deposit of silver.
To actually find this silver, they had to trek exactly 100 miles away from civilization. Now, being 100 miles out in the deep, remote wilderness made Andrew insanely homesick. He just missed his family so much. So to cope with the isolation and kind of keep morale up around camp, Andrew brought along his beloved, super playful dog for company. This dog followed him everywhere, just an absolute joy to have around. Then, one afternoon, they actually find it, the massive silver deposit they'd been dreaming of. To access it, they follow standard mining explosion protocol. Andrew enthusiastically hands out sticks of dynamite. They strategically wedge them into the rocks, tether everything to a single lead fuse, light it, and then instantly bolt for the safety of their wooden cover shack to wait out the massive blast. Now, what's really interesting about this is, crouched in the shack, Andrew notices a horrifying little detail. His loyal dog wasn't inside with them. He peeks out the window, and his blood just runs completely cold. The dog had watched Andrew place the stick of dynamite on the ground and assumed it was the start of their absolute favorite game. The dog ran over, scooped up the lit dynamite in its mouth, happily trotted back, and dropped the sizzling explosive right outside the wall of their wooden shack. It is just a purely grim irony. The dog drops the dynamite, looks up at Andrew through the window, and then excitedly bounds off into the distance, waiting for his master to throw the stick again. There was literally no time to react. The dynamite detonated, killing Andrew instantly and horribly maiming his mining partners inside. Meanwhile, the dog, who was happily waiting off in the distance, survived the entire blast completely unharmed.
Section 4, The Cost of Burnout, Chattanooga, Tennessee, 1913. For our final story, we're heading down to Tennessee in 1913. This is Abraham Wells Boyd Jr. At just 21 years old, Abraham was this young businessman whose massive ambition was quietly destroying his life. He was part owner of this incredibly expensive automobile racetrack that was currently under construction. He firmly believed this one project would secure his family's wealth forever. But man, the day-to-day reality of actually building it was absolute torture. Abraham was buried under an absolute mountain of pressure. He's bleeding cash into massive construction costs with literally zero income coming in. Even worse, thieves were sneaking onto the site at night and stealing their lumber. To fix this, he hires a security guard, but the guy just straight up fails to show. So Abraham, who is already stretched to his absolute breaking point, is forced to stay up all night working a dangerous unpaid security shift just to protect his investment. He is running on total physical and mental exhaustion. So it's 7 a.m., and a completely burnt-out Abraham finally drags himself home. He just needs to grab some paperwork and drop off some borrowed security gear before heading straight to his day job. He chats for a second with his newly awakened wife, then, carrying the crushing emotional weight of all this stress, he walks over to the bed to give his sleeping 2-year-old son a kiss. I mean, his kid was his ultimate motivation, right? The whole reason he was enduring this nightmare. But in his exhausted, totally sleep-deprived state, Abraham overlooked one tiny critical detail. That borrowed gear he had to return, it was a loaded security pistol. Abraham wasn't a gun owner. He had no real experience handling firearms. In his groggy haze, he'd shoved the heavy pistol into its holster, but he completely forgot to fasten the locking strap over the top. The gun was just sitting loose inside the leather. And the conclusion here is just heartbreaking. As Abraham leans over the bed to kiss his son, gravity takes over. That heavy, unsecured gun slips smoothly right out of the open holster. It hits the floor and discharges a single, fatal round straight into Abraham's chest. In his desperate push to secure a wealthy future for his family, that one split second of exhaustion-induced negligence ended his life instantly, right there in front of the very people he was trying so hard to provide for. Section 5.
The devil in the details, a cautionary conclusion. So the crucial point here is this. Ambition is an incredibly powerful engine for sure, but it comes with some massive blind spots. In all 4 of these stories, perfectly laid plans were completely unraveled by the most minuscule, overlooked variables. A piece of scrap paper left on a counter, a crushed tick smeared against an antique ring, a loyal dog wanting to play a game of fetch, an unfastened strap on a borrowed holster. These true stories are a vivid reminder of the actual cost of overlooking the little things. When we are sprinting toward our grandest goals, exhausted and just hyper-focused on the finish line, that is exactly when we're most vulnerable to the variables we ignore. So as you go out there building your own future and taking your own risks, I want to leave you with this question to reflect on. In your pursuit of success, what tiny details are you leaving to chance?